Sure.
Like, one of the weird things about this particular year is not just your team in the LCS, but even in LEC, like Fnatic, obviously, we saw these crazy moves between the splits. In fact, I've even found on talk shows, it's almost ruining the dialogue because people keep saying off-season when they actually mean like the mid-season, essentially, and they keep making people think they mean between the end of the year. So it's very rare in the history of the game. Typically, when you're the GM, it goes like this. In the off-season, you build your team, and after that, you shout a lot if you need a player change. You basically have to use subs, or you have to use like an academy player, someone who's not on a team. You don't really have much talent to pick from. You were obviously in the very unique position where, if people don't know, this really insane thing, like if people don't know, the way the residency in NA has changed is you don't just get it after a set amount of time now. You have to effectively get like the green card, basically, right? Which at this point in time, that's in the hands of people far above esports.
It's a hopium situation. For
yes,
sure.
Exactly. And you never know. You could get it tomorrow, or you could get it years from now. You could be denied forever. You never can know, right? So basically, whereas in past years, for example, people could actually look and go, right, well, Jensen next split will be a resident, so I could already prepare that I'm going to maybe get this guy. And, they could already do like the master plan on the whiteboard, as it were. In your case, you just found out, wow, Ssumday's got it, and I can actually get a player now, and you've been able to make this crazy move to get Abidagi in the middle of the year, and it's basically been the game changer, right? So you must have been put in a very unique position. I'm sure you weren't planning for that in the beginning, right?
Sure. I mean, it was, as the season went on in spring, it was clear that this team wasn't going to reach the goals we stated at the start of the year, the idea of making worlds and competing. Hot start, but kind of by like week 7, 8 of the regular season, I'm already sitting there being like, okay, what can I do, for the next split? How can we make a change? Like, our leadership is very aggressive about exhausting every opportunity to challenge, basically that it's like focus on what's needed to get to a position I can hypothesize based on my experience or what my coaches and scouts will say, and then they'll work out the financials and stuff later depending on how strong the pitch is. And so at that time, week 8, week 9, I don't know about the Ssumday situation. There was no indication that it will come mid-year. It was there was no idea there. So I'm building out every scenario in order to be able to change our fortunes in summer. Whether that's like importing a minor region mid to academy and then having to make other big decisions, like if that really takes off in a short time frame, then maybe that's something. If that doesn't take off till the end of the year and we still don't have a green card, maybe that's a 2022 move. So a lot of the scenarios, it wasn't a valid scenario to entertain big ticket EU mid, both for the reasons you're mentioning, that it's very difficult to make something like that happen mid-year, and because we just didn't have the import flexibility to do that. So for sure, being eliminated against TSM, and you guys have talked about this series, winning positions 4 games, losing 3 of them. I was preparing for the leadership meeting, where they're basically going to be asked, why didn't we reach our goal? And then the day before the leadership meeting, this document from the gods drops. And the leadership meeting very much went from like a crisis meeting to a like, so who's out there and who can we get? Like the vibe changed,
dude.
Literally because a government document showed up. It's because like literally I got a message from Ssumday on Discord, and he was like, this document showed up, and he just took a photo of it, and I was like, wait, is that what I think it is? And I haven't seen one of those documents before, right? And it was, and then the course of history was changed.
It was actually crazy because it was like 3 days after you had been eliminated or something like that, and you texted me, you're like, Ssumday got his green card. I was like, holy shit, you are one lucky motherfucker, because like it's crazy. I mean, the serendipity of all of this, but obviously you were prepared for this scenario. Like you said, you were running through all these different options, but the timing couldn't have been better because you had the maximum amount of time basically between spring and summer over MSI to negotiate this. Schalke was collapsing at the same time.
I mean, look, it could have been better. It could have been at the start of the year, right? Like it could have been the previous off season, but given the scenario, it couldn't have been better.
Yeah, G2 could have been in financial distress and you could have gotten caps. Yes, there could have things that, there could have been things that could have gone better. But as far as scenarios went, you had the maximum amount of time in order to negotiate a deal, and you had a collapsing team in Europe with a very good mid laner that was suddenly potentially available, whose contract was going to be up at the end of the year anyway. So the question would be, do you get value for this player now if you're Schalke and make money, or do you just roll, you're selling the team anyway, so what the fuck do you care?
By the way, just so we can clarify, if you're watching the show someday, like, I think you actually interpreted it too literally. You're not literally an NA player now, mate. Like, you can go back to being really good again. Like, you're just technically a resident of the region. Like, you didn't have to embrace it. Like, I know you've embraced all American culture and everything, but like, you went too far there, mate. Like, you can go back to being really good. It's all right.
I mean, you can your words hurt, right? And Ssumday for sure is like a very proud player. I mean, I know Monty will remember this when he was still in LCK. He was one of the few players who used Twitter pretty actively, and he would write very emotional messages even after regular season wins and stuff. Like, he had a very close rapport with his fans from streaming and things like that. So I know all the words out there in the past have really built him up, and this year I'm sure we're taking him down, regardless of whatever support you can provide. But he went out there and neutralized Alfari yesterday, right? And that
I have a question about that, actually, by the way, dude. Because I noticed in both of the series against Team Liquid, it's almost like they had like exactly that approach. It wasn't like you're going to win lane. Like, they weren't delusional. Like, Alfari is probably the best laner in the entire fucking LCS right now. But it's like, if you even look at the picks, if people don't know, the first time in the upper bracket when Team Liquid played on the Thieves, Ssumday played 3 games of Ornn. By the way, it is not an Ornn meta. Ornn is not even played in the world, as far as I know. But by the way, it worked. Like, it's not that here's the thing. You phrased it perfectly, because you used the kind of terminology they use for defenders in sports like the NBA, where essentially you can't play proper defense now. So the offensive player always has an edge, right? So what they say is, you're not going to stop him. You try to contain. You use terminology like that. Like, essentially the premise is, if they were going to score 50 in the NBA, just make him score 40 and you did your job. Make him score 30 and we'd probably win the game. I feel like he did this, dude, in these 2 series. Like, Alfari, where he could, did what he could in the team fights. But there's a bunch of times where he didn't come out of lane with enormous leads and smash the whole series. So actually, Ssumday did do his job.
I think there's no hubris with Ssumday. What most people won't know is he was the player grinding to 2, 3 a.m. playing solo queue every day. He was the player. I mean, actually, Reaper had mentioned this when we were talking yesterday, at the after party, that he would come to Reaper every day, being like, "What do I need to do to win? Like, do I need to play the carries? Do I need to play the tanks? Like, how do we do this? Like, he wasn't under any illusions, and the role of neutralizing only works when you have threats elsewhere that can prosper, right? Like, last year, if you remember, in our summer run with Contracts and Pum in the lineup, we had a mini resurgence. We went 6-6 after a poor start, but our only win condition by playoffs was like, which crazy carry can Ssumday play? Because if it isn't a crazy carry out of meta, we're gonna lose. And this year, obviously, things are very different. We have players like FBI and Abadaga and Closer who are carry players in themselves. But on the one hand, this carry player at heart, even though he's a great tank player, has had to change because of the pieces around him. But then to also come in and be like, I'll just play whatever it is. I don't care what the scoreline looks like. Let's just find a way to win. Like, what you can definitely say about Ssumday with his 4-year odyssey at this team is he's just always wanted to win, and he's been loyal enough to want to win here. And he kept reinventing himself to the last possible minute. And the moment I saw that Shen game in game number 1,
it was great.
It was a Shen scenario, and Shen is like, to
also
me,
not a top champion as well.
But it's one of those legendary Ssumday champions as well. And whenever it's like, it's a Shen scenario, like, we hadn't played Shen in scrims maybe a couple of games in like a month, right? But like, if there's a Shen scenario, you're fucking giving it to Ssumday, right? So like, stuff like that, and his emotion both in the interview afterwards and the hours afterwards, like, he last won 7 years ago. I don't know if there's ever been a bigger major region championship victory break, right? 7 years,
almost certainly
wins.
Yeah,
especially with a 7-year played the entire time.
And a 7-year career is like unbelievable just to consider, right? I was talking to him, and like, I'm 34, so 7 years ago I was 27, so like, it's not that huge a jump in time, but for him, both in terms of his age,
he was 15
he was 18 7 years. He's 25 now.
Oh, okay.
But more importantly, like, consider, like, when he won that title, he was with you casting, COG's there, it's in the speech in Busan. He couldn't speak a word of English. Like, he would never even considered coming to the West or anything like that. He was the second oldest player on a super youthful Arrows team. And like, how far he's come as a human, and as a player, and all those things in 7 years, kind of unfathomable. So yeah, it was obviously a really big moment to see him happy because he's definitely not been too happy this year, just from his own performance and his own high expectations, but definitely a happy moment for him.
I mean, as a longtime fan of his and having watched his entire career, it is super nice to see that. And I think I applaud the game plan that you guys had, because Ssumday can't lose lane to Alphari if he's in bot lane the whole time.
Perfect. Yeah.
I mean, it does.
Some of those dives were wild, man. I was like, whoa, okay.
Dude, I was really impressed, especially by the Shen dive that you guys had in the bot lane with the Alistair.
I mean, if that goes wrong, like, then his lane is doomed, right? Like, he needed to get involved in kills there, otherwise.
Oh no, the aggro juggling was amazing on that format.
It was really good.
It was sick. It was like some old school Korean shit from like season 3 or something. Yeah.
Yeah, I was incredibly impressed by the execution, and obviously, I think you guys had a very good handle on your own strengths. And what I liked about what you guys did was that you played your game entirely, which is like early game aggression. Like, we have this game plan for getting away from Alphari, so we're going to play the Shen, or Ssumday, known for his Renekton play, right? Like, less known for his Gangplank play, but at least he has a global and can affect the rest of the map. So I thought the game plan coming in was really strong overall. Obviously, you guys just got to play blue side and first pick Viego, so you were definitely just putting your balls on the table and saying, this is how we want to play the game, right? Mm-hmm. Deal with it. And closer was incredibly good. I have to say, I'm surprised because I'm somewhat hesitant, because I'm scared that you guys won the early game so hard that we didn't get to see like the kind of breakdown in the mid and late game that has like plagued you guys to a certain degree. But also, we just didn't see that identity of 100 Thieves where the shot calling kind of falls apart later in the game. There were very clean wins. I mean, there's not much to learn here because you guys just destroyed them.
Basically, Papa, people do say the knock on 100 Thieves is like, essentially, if the game goes long enough, the team itself doesn't know how to close the game. Like they sort of do run out of ways somehow. So, like, what would you say to that angle? Like, is it something that has been, have people on your end sort of identified this? Is it understood?
Oh, of course, right? And like, I did another show about, it was an interview about being a GM and like, what does it mean to be a GM? And one of the things I said was, if there's a worrying trend with the team, we better have diagnosed it weeks before people on the outside are seeing it, right? Like, it's our job to be on top. I guess my job singularly to be on top of like conditions or improvements or trajectories and things like that. And definitely it was clear to see that mid game was something we needed to improve on, especially, and in being able to trade objectives effectively and set up objectives effectively. Like, that was a knock on our game. But it's something that we had identified, and Reaper was very much kind of, it wasn't like a quick fix solution. Like, if you consider that we came in hot despite having a head coach and mid lane change mid-year, that's already unlikely, right? You expect it's going to be ramp up time. You're probably going to be coming up hot with a few strategies that you're really good at, maybe surprisingly good at, but you're not going to have the full playbook, right? Like, it's very unlikely that you're just everything's going to gel like an act of God or something, right? So there was definitely stuff that came less naturally to our lineup, and it took time to improve on. And I think we've been doubted pretty much in every series that was played. And I think about the broadcast perspective of not seeing what's happening behind closed doors and how scrims are going and things like that. And it's one of those things where, some people in my position are like, fuck the haters, like they were wrong and they predicted against us and we were right. But it's like, with available information, everybody made the prediction I would make if I was a broadcaster of like, sure, like you guys won there, but like, I've seen all this from Team Liquid and this is what Team Liquid stands for and they've always been like this. So I completely get the outside POV, but I know I can say that we came in on Thursday and we were like, we should win this weekend, like Cloud9's a difficult opponent for us, but especially if we beat them, like we will easily beat Team Liquid was kind of the team vibe, and everyone believed that. It wasn't like the thing you say for like false confidence.
What made you believe that about what?
They were our main practice partner, Team Liquid. Like, we played with them a lot.
It makes sense just because you're on the other sides of the bracket, and then they were in the lower bracket. Yeah, of course, exactly,
for sure.
Yeah.
And look, they're a good practice partner. They practice hard. They take it seriously. They're a good practice partner. So we're happy to scrim them. And the results there were always fine. Good to great. And
by the way, just, if I can specifically ask you the answer, obviously it's up to you. I'm guessing you were winning most of the scrims against Team Liquid. Because put it this way, when I saw the draft on that final, dude, a lot of people were very shocked by Team Liquid's drafts. To me, this is where they don't know the industry. When I see drafts like they were doing, that tells me, like, you've played a ton of scrims against them, and you really think those are your best options.
Yeah, I mean, scrim results were good. I know that's like I always don't know how much to go into. I feel like I already go into it more than most. But scrims were good, and there's a lot of data. Like, it's one of those things where when you prepare for some teams who you maybe have only scrimmed a couple of times in the year, you actually load up those scrim drafts. And you're like, wait, what are we showing them? Because, like, maybe you have something you've only shown to Team Liquid that you haven't shown to other teams. So you're playing another team, great. They won't be ready for this. With Team Liquid, we'd kind of shown them everything. We played them a lot. And scrim results had always been good. We reflected on the series that we lost to them, and we felt we kind of identified our issue there. It was around a lot of team fight execution. Like, we weren't clean enough on that. We felt like if we played fights better, if a couple people leveled up there, then we would have won in that series. So with that in mind and with a singular goal to focus on, I think it just was one of those things where we pushed past C9. We're in the final against Team Liquid, a team that we fancy our chances against. This is our chance to win it all, right? And I don't know how many times we're going to come into a finals weekend believing we can win it all rather than hoping we can win it all. But that belief was mirrored in game because, man, what a fucking decimation in the final. Like,
I'm very confident.
I couldn't have expected that's how it would look because, like, very much it's always impressionist painting when you're a GM where you're like, oh, it's looking like this in scrims. Like, let's see how it looks like on stage. So when it comes together that well, you're just like, okay, all right then. I guess we're just champions today.
By the way, on the top, go on, Monty.
No, I think going back to your earlier point about you guys having a lot to work on, I think that was what was so impressive about the start of summer for you, though, was that you had so many different styles that it just seemed effortless to play. And then you were pioneering things like the Ziggs Senna bot lane that then went to other regions around the world. So it really felt, I was surprised to see the later season collapse because it went so well initially that a lot of the problems, like, you didn't have versatility issues, you didn't have early game issues, you didn't have late game issues, right? It just seemed like you were a very complete team. So that's
we didn't really have late games or mid games, though. We just kind of finger differenced everybody and had a good read on the meta. If you have as mechanically a good team as we do, plus a good read on the meta, good fucking luck, right? Like, we didn't have to get into mid game stall fests. It wasn't really the meta, and the flex picks like did so much damage at that time that our issues weren't laid to bear publicly until kind of week 5, week 6. But internally, like, obviously some scrims do go on. Like, it was clear that there were things we need to work on, and that's why it's kind of like, well, how much do we change if we're winning? You know, or like, do we focus on our strengths to continue winning, or what about these like weaknesses that are still there that are below the surface? And I think with the 3 scrim days and how things are set up, you kind of get Tuesday to like, all right, what do we need to work on? What are our gaping issues? And if you haven't solved those by the end of Tuesday, you kind of have to go into like winning on Friday, match prep on Wednesday, Thursday, right? So I think we tried to make adjustments. We made small improvements, but the week off afforded to us by finishing top 2 was super, super valuable. And I know there'll be probably on the TSM camp, they probably think it was not valuable to have that week off. You know, there's always that we need the time to focus on ourselves versus now we're coming in cold after they've played a best of 5 on stage duality. And I think they're both valid depending on the group. But for our group, the players really enjoyed playing with each other. There's really strong team vibes. Everyone was super bought in and practicing. There were no conduct issues.
What did you do in that week off to like fix the issues that when you had time?
Honestly, it's for us. It was amount of scrims. Like, you go from the 15 scrim week, or so maybe a night block, so 15 to 17 scrims on an LCS week. To we had, I believe, 9 or 10 scrim days. So we had 50 scrims before. We actually had more than 50 because we played some night blocks. We had over 50 scrims to actually have breathing room because you don't have the match lingering in like a couple of days to be like, all right, like, how do we want to play out objective trading? How do we want to play out the game and things like that? And for that, it was really valuable. However, if you're a team that has kind of like band-aid issues that you've been carrying all season, actually having the extra time might lead to bad scenarios or, like falling out or something. Like it might not be productive, but we were afforded a really, really productive 10 days. And while we weren't the finished article then, like we weren't a perfect team, I didn't know if we were going to beat EG on the day that we did. That was definitely the highest stress match for us, which is kind of weird to think about given that we won a title. But the stress was super front loaded. But after qualifying for Worlds and then seeing continued improvement from there, that's when confidence started to come in, which I haven't had too much as a GM, is confidence in best of 5 performance, but afforded by a lot of hard work on our side.
Want to see more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.